Robbie Pitts.
Hello, Todd.
Good
As
morning.
always, it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
How you
It's been a
been?
whole year. It's been a whole year.
It has.
I've been good. Well, start of the week, as it is for us all.
Yeah. You're currently in Los Angeles.
Yep.
Were you in
In good old
Australia the
LA.
last time? Yeah. The last time we spoke, I think you were in Australia.
No, that was the first time when
Okay.
when you and Joey both spoke to me. The last time I spoke to you, no, I was already back living in LA.
Okay.
Think I had, yeah, because I came back in March of 2021. So it's kind of wild. I mean, I'm sure you feel this too, just how kind of quickly time has gone by, and even the concept of that's initial stages of the pandemic, everything to do with that feels kind of so long ago. And I
Right.
guess in some ways it sort of is.
Yeah. Time is flying.
Yeah, for it's always for better and for worse in a lot of ways, but there's nothing like immediacy to get you motivated to gas
Right.
yourself up.
Clock's ticking. Hey, this is a temporary ride. You better do it up.
Facts.
How old are you now?
I'm 36.
36. Wow.
Yeah.
40's right
Yeah.
around the corner.
Yeah, I know. It's a wild thought. It's a very wild thought. I mean, not only perhaps as a human being, but I think also as a rollerblader, you know.
Yeah.
But as each year goes by, there are more and more rollerbladers who are entering their 40s who either are new to it or even who have been skating for a long time. Did you turn 40 recently, or
Last
trying to
year.
remember what? Okay,
Yeah, I just turned
I thought
41.
it was nice.
Yeah.
Nice. How does it feel for you, like at this point? In terms of like, sure, if you look 10 years back, like your life in a lot of ways might be quite significantly different.
Right. Physically, I feel great. Psychologically, I think there's new battles when you turn 40. That's what I've observed. New battles uh, in terms of like questioning things a little bit too much. You get overly questioning, I feel like, in your
Yes.
40s. At least I have. Like,
No, I can completely understand that.
yeah.
I've definitely noticed that a lot in regards to trying new things in life in general.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's kind of fascinating how you end up being like that. You feel like um, I think you look at things with a larger scope of like how long things take to maybe like um, get into, become skillful at, and I think you look, unfortunately, a little too far ahead of yourself. And I do think you always have to remind yourself, like, oh, like, if you do want to start something new, like just remember, you have to start at the beginning, and your life is not over. So, and I do think there's also this element that you find yourself being way more critical of yourself in terms of maybe you're more self-conscious about like
Yeah.
not being good at something, not being skillful, looking, clumsy. Yeah, I guess you just become self-conscious, or you can become self-conscious of feeling like you might embarrass yourself, right?
Right. I think there's a arrogance that you have in your 20s and your 30s. You just think you're at least for me, I'm just speaking from my experience. I just felt like
Yeah.
I was just the dopest shit, you know? And I feel like when you turn 40, my experience is I'm just so over myself. Like I'm not, I've kind of lost that feeling like I'm special or I'm dope. Like I'm just like this 40-year-old like dork. In some
Right.
ways it's good, in some ways it's freeing because I feel like I don't have to live up to this like cool guy persona that I have intrinsically, but for some things it can make life a little bit uncomfortable, like who am I? What am I doing? And
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think you also get comfortable with like your environment. particularly if you've become situated in something for a while. It like gives you context and identity to who you are, and I guess breaking out of that, you become more vulnerable like very quickly. So maybe there is a kind of thing, because I think about that a lot in terms of vulnerability within different social situations, and I guess the fact that like no one really wants to feel out of their depth, or like, to feel isolated amongst people. We all kind of want, I would figure, want to find connection and, ultimately just want to be liked or loved. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I think that's the thing when move forward in your life, particularly like you enter your 20s and then enter 40s. And for you, like saying entering your 40s, all that time you're trying to find in some way, probably some stability of connection to like yourself, your identity, the people around you, your family. It becomes really solidified, and I do think that is for the better in a lot of ways. Like finding comfort in all that is extremely wonderful. Um, but yeah, but it's absolutely challenging, like trying to do something outside of that, because I imagine, you live in Kamloops, and I'm sure like, if you traveled, um, it would give you a completely different experience. Or if you like, just in regards to like interacting with more people, or yeah, how do you feel like in
Definitely.
regards to that?
I have been craving that for sure. I've
Right.
been craving some novel locations and novel humans, and kind of breaking out of my routine and day to day. I was very excited to go to Blading Cup, so I was really
Yeah.
disappointed that that got canceled. Because I hear what you're saying. I think I could benefit from being around some different humans and skating some different spots and just experiencing some different places. Um,
Sure.
and so what are you up to in LA these days?
Just living my best life. or,
Nice.
tr- or trying. No, in all seriousness, interesting sort of journey here. In a lot of the ways, particularly like post pandemic for me, because I've been focusing on sort of entering and playing with different sort of opportunities that like I was always curious about, and that I guess didn't really have the opportunity to sort of entertain. One of like the main things that I've been doing kind of since I moved back here was like, um, I guess exploring work opportunities, and just even just for myself, like working within like the commercial space of advertising, like being talent or an actor or a model for commercials, and in that kind of way, because I'd never really done it too much before the pandemic. And I first connected with my agency like in 2019, and then it wasn't even quite a year, and then the pandemic happened, and that changed the way everyone was doing things, and a lot of like, I guess, opportunities. So it really wasn't until I came back. But I sort of had wanted to see how that kind of operated in terms of just even as a work lifestyle. Because like for me back in Australia, for instance, and actually for all the time I was living in Los Angeles prior to um, the pandemic, was basically I've always had, it was either a part-time job, when I was in high school, or when I was studying university, or but pretty much like a full-time job or full-time job thereafter. And I was focused on my artistic and creative pursuits, whether that was in or out of rollerblading at the same time. But coming here, LA is such an interesting sort of city where people are sort of aspiring to be so many different things, finding all these different ways of, making ends meet whilst pursuing the thing that they're trying to do, like lots of different streams of income. And I'd never really been exposed to that. My family never really was like that. Even in my extended family, it was not really like that. Everyone, in a lot of ways, like just sort of had one kind of job. I didn't really know anyone who was like, um, an actor who was an artist or anything like. So I never had too much guidance as far as that. So in a lot of ways, this has been an experiment of seeing how that kind of goes. And it's been fun. Plus, also I would say it's also been quite um, a hard learning lesson too. But I guess in a lot of ways, that with a steady, interest and drive for rollerblading at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you been skating in LA?
I have. It's interestingly like um, I would say at times maybe not as much as I have prior, and I think it's like because I've been rollerblading for I think 25 years at this point at this year, um, and yeah, because I started in '98. And I do find over the course of the time I've been rollerblading, my level of it's like my love for it has never like waned. It's always been the same. But I do think level of like enthusiasm, also motivation has altered at different times depending on context in your life. Um, and I think there in some ways, particularly if you get so interconnected with the industry side, that stuff can sometimes overshadow, your initial sort of feeling of the act itself. Because sometimes I
Definitely.
personally find I end up thinking too much about culture, the industry, or community um, when I'm not skating, that it kind of impacts my feeling towards skating in the sense that like as soon as I put the skates on and I go skating, whether that is with other people, because obviously the social aspect of skating is the thing I absolutely love too. But the main thing is like even if I just put my skates on and skate it like kind of in like my backyard, the driveway we sort of have in the back of the house I live in, or whether I just go skating in the street out of my house, like that feeling of putting skates on drives me back to the initial kind of like the freedom of just rolling around. And like even if I don't have obstacles to do tricks on, the movement of being on skates is the thing that I'll probably always be addicted to. Um, so I find myself always having to remind myself to do that. Like, um, I've had like a few little injury issues this year that I haven't had as much in the past that I've had to take some time off on. One being earlier in the year, I gradually kept noticing it being an issue was the inside of my left knee. Like just like it wasn't really severe, but gradually it started to like impact the actual movements of my skating. Like um, I remember when I was shooting photos of Brandon Smith for the Wish Frames promo. Um, like I did this like shifty air over like a bank to bank channel gap kind of thing, and even doing that repeatedly over that session, like let's say it was 30 attempts for the to get the right photo, it gradually like intensified the pain more. So I remember after kind of not too long after that, I took maybe like a month off from skating to rest it. I remember speaking to Ben Magaziner about some physical therapy of techniques of things I could do to, strengthen the muscles and alleviate some of that tension. And that with the combination of being off skates, really helped alleviate it. It doesn't cause me the pain it once did, which was really amazing. And then I didn't. I skated it in New York for when there was the Boshi Popov and the Metro Cloud Classic, which
Yeah.
was amazing. Which was an amazing event. Um, but after that, my ankle actually was really swollen, but it wasn't from. Interestingly enough, it wasn't from my skates or from something due to skating. I'm pretty sure, and I've said this to people recently, which is kind of funny, but I'm pretty sure it was from like literally just walking an entire day, like a lot of going to a lot of different places. Maybe instead of catching the train, like walking there for like half an hour and then walking somewhere else to get food, and then literally the whole day. But I was in cowboy boots and they got like raised Cuban heels, and they're not. I suppose in some ways they're not really designed maybe for that. To walk
Yeah.
like across New York for that long. But the next day, my ankle was like really swollen and tender, and when I got back to LA, I remember putting my skates on. I was like, "Whoa, no way!" So it's probably been a month since that, and I've skated I think 4 times in the last week or so, and it feels great now. But it definitely was like I had to let it stop for a sec. But But I will also say this, because I'd love to hear your opinion on this, if in regards to if you've had times where you've skated. Well, you also, I should say this. You do have a winter that LA doesn't experience. But I was going to
Yes,
see what you think about, like, I find if I'm off skates for a little bit, usually when I get back on them, it sort of reinvigorates the energy, the feeling, and reminds me of the love that I have for it. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
definitely. Yeah, it's a critical aspect is the reflection time, taking time off your skates. But it's frustrating because when you take time off, you get a little bit less dialed, a little bit less like physically adapted to it and refined. You get a bit rusty. So it's healthy psychologically, but then you have to deal with being a little bit rusty on your skates, not having all your skills like dialed into muscle memory and things like that. But it's definitely critical. I think it's one of the reasons why there's so many good rollerbladers that come out of Canada is that forced reflection, time of reflection
Mm,
during winter where you can't skate, you have to take a break because you definitely can skate too much and
sure.
and you can lose appreciation for the simple feeling of rolling. And it's so healthy to take a break and then come back and put the things on and like, oh wow, just rolling, just being appreciative for that simple act.
Absolutely. Do you
But
find do
you
you
just
find
have to lower your expectations a little bit about what you're capable of after you've taken a break.
that's very important?
Yeah,
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 I've been speaking of this like the past couple of weeks, which is kind of fascinating. That sometimes at the moment, like when I do put on my skates and go to intend to go out skating to do tricks and that kind of stuff, that there is this initial period within the first 10 minutes that I'm just like, whoa, is this even still accessible to me? Just
right,
just because of like maybe the element of rigidity within my body, like straight away. And like the idea of like jumping on something really high feels like so out of reach. But then it
right,
usually just takes me, obviously, like just a little bit longer to first warm up and then sit down and stretch and then get back into it. So it's usually after like a 45-minute kind of period where I feel like, oh no, like this is how I remember it. Like, sure, I'm not like trying to jump a really large gap, but the mobility it becomes back. And particularly if you stay in that like fluidity of not stopping skating, so to speak, like you're still moving around and being active and maintaining, I guess, that um whatever happens within your body, within your muscles, that it's activated. I
right,
usually feel fine, which is great. So it's just, I think it's that learning curve, I think, for me is getting older and just understanding like the capabilities of your body, and also kind of just working with that, like you said, like working within maybe not having as higher expectations, but just working within your limitations. Because there's always it's fascinating thinking about, like, if you skate for long enough, you've probably built up an arsenal of tricks that you find accessible that you can do. I think the fascinating thing of like being an older skater, and trying to have fun with it, is that like I'm like far more like picky and choosy of in regards to like the things I might attempt on things, because often it's like the feeling and that feeling of challenge that I want, as opposed to being really specific sometimes with the trick, that I'm just like, oh, I can get that same feeling whether it was like doing the position as a soul grind, or it was like a Mizzou. Um, Sometimes those things are so interchangeable at this point that I don't get too like hard on myself that I'm not doing um like a true spin mark here or something, or like I'll go a whole session and I didn't even do a top side. Um, yeah, because the enjoyment of the tricks that I still did were still gratifying. And it's just like, oh yeah,
right,
that's okay. Yeah.
right.
Do you find that for yourself with like, because I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
you're immensely talented and you can do a lot of tricks. at this
But
point.
a lot of days I go out skating, and it, harder tricks are just not within my reach. They're just simple. You just have to start from where you are, and just be accepting of, like,
Mm,
okay, today is just a simple, I'm just doing soul grinds, just like hitting some royales or whatever. It's so important to keep your expectations low, because I've had a lot of experiences where my expectations of myself are really high, and then I
yeah,
put the skates on, and then, like you said, you realize how difficult it actually is. Things are really easy when you're off your skates. When you're lying in your bed and thinking about skating, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and this, and
yeah,
you can get ahead of yourself, and that can cause so much frustration when you are actually out in the world skating. You have wheels under your feet, and there's all these variables, and the pavement is rough, and in real life the shit is hard. So you have to, you know it's important for me to keep my expectations really low, and then from that you slowly build up, and then sometimes you are capable of those harder things, or new innovative things. um, but you have to allow it to happen naturally.
yeah, absolutely.
That's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is like, how do you create the conditions mentally for a good session? Because it's something that I've struggled with for decades, and I
Mm,
have not mastered. You would think by the time you were 40, you would master the psychological game, and be
right.
appreciative for the simple things, but I still do deal with, like, very frustrating sessions. Do you
Mm.
ever get frustrated by skating, or go out and just kind of get bummed on it, or bummed on yourself?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's always sort of like good to remind yourself that like, there's another day, and not to get like too preoccupied with like what you're getting down on yourself, because sometimes you just like might need a reset. A lot of the time, sometimes it
Right.
could be external factors that are like interfering with like your capacity to enjoy yourself. Like it might be things to do with your social life, your family life, your home life, job. Like all those things can sometimes impact, and as much as we want the escape of skating, sometimes it might not happen.
Right.
But I suppose you also can like channel that energy into it too. I know people definitely have like spoken to me about that in the past, and I'm sure I have too. Maybe there's elements of frustration, and you sort of like use that within skating, and it might come
Yeah.
out like it might be more of an emotive response that you're kind of a bit more aggressive, even more than just
Right.
being an aggressive rollerblader. Uh,
Well, it's
but
funny how that can be a double-edged sword. You can use that stress in your life, and you can turn it into gold. You can kind of harness it in the right way, and
Absolutely,
and and use it as fuel, or it can really, ruin your session. If you can't really let go of it, it can, be hard to get out of your head.
yeah,
So it's funny how it can really aid you, or it can ruin your session,
I,
depending on kind of maybe how you're dealing with it, or how you're approaching the session. There's so many variables, right? That's what.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, whether you're like choosing to film something or not, and I'm sure you can agree to that as well. That changes the dynamic, and
Yeah.
like I often feel like in some ways when I just skate, I have usually a pretty healthy level of expectation that I'm enjoying myself mostly when I'm doing it. Um, I always find there's that like repetition of like trying to do the trick when you're like trying to film it, and it's just that repeated process of going around and around, and it's almost a little bit like maybe kind of trying to equate it to like let's say you're doing a run, or like a certain time. Maybe it's something at the gym, right? Like it's like allocated, like you have to do like this amount within like 10 minutes or something, and it becomes agonizing. I find like sometimes filming tricks being like that, particularly if it takes a lot of your energy, and you sort of get, you know, a bit of fatigue over the course of time of trying it, and you still haven't like got it kind of to the point where you're accepting it, or to how your standards are, or you're liking it. But that's probably like really sometimes one of the only times like where it does really affect you. It's that kind of balance, because like, you know, there is a healthy thing in filming. There's a wonderful thing of being able to like, you know, share your takes, share your progression, share your love of skating, share something greater to the language of skating. But at the same time, I feel like it can also be a burden to the expression of just your own skating or your time skating, because it's like you enter a different kind of dimension as soon as like the camera pops out and you become
Oh yeah.
focusing on doing that with someone. Different, I think we've spoken in the past, different if someone was just constantly filming from afar. But yeah, sometimes like that in itself can be difficult. But I also look at it at the same
I've
time.
noticed that you're, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, I noticed that that's not like exclusive to rollerblading, but lots of people, you know, in different other jobs and industries, like find that as well. You know, sometimes you just have to persevere with the whatever it is and get through the day, get through the job. You know, and you find the best in, at times, maybe an uncomfortable or even an agonizing situation. Actually, I think it's a huge skill to have in life. Not to just pull out or give in as soon as like there is a bit of like hardship faced. And I find that when
Right.
filming a lot, I'm sure you can relate to that. Like there's times where you do really want to give up. But I actually think personally, my tolerance for that kind of suffering, maybe it's a horrible way to describe it, but it kind of um, is quite high. I have a high tolerance, and I think my endurance is pretty good.
It's good to develop that persistence. For sure, it's a great
Yeah.
life skill because you're always gonna run into difficult things. Yeah, but I've noticed that you did the I think the last edit you put out was the Skate Hard 3000 uh, edit,
Yep.
and that was about a year ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so it kind of looks like you've taken a little break from creating edits or filming.
Yeah.
Um, have you been filming at all, or are you kind of intentionally taking a break from it?
Yeah. It's sort of a couple of things. Like I would say a lot of the time, you know, like for instance with Skate Hard 3000, um I enlisted my good mate John Jenkins to come and film that. Like I approached it like I suppose any other industry would. Like, you know, I paid him for his time, flew him out here to work on it together. I tried to be as strategic as possible to minimize the amount of um you know, loose time you can sometimes have when you go skating and filming. But I think because of there's that dynamic that's not really there anymore.
You
As
mean like a
like,
filmer skater
yeah,
dynamic?
yeah, because also like I became a filmer for a good period of time too. And I'm not really actively filming skating, so I don't really bring my camera out. And in turn, like for instance with Full Spiral, and also with like Burn LA, I would have people be filming who I was filming would be filming me. Um, but that relationship is not quite the same anymore in that, and just my relationship to skating. Like I haven't really been as focused or as motivated to want to go out and film, because it is quite a task. Um, so in a lot of ways, I feel like kind of happy with what I created at the time, and I more just sometimes want to just get out there and just skate for myself.
Yeah.
In terms of just remind myself of the fun and your experience that you have, and you know you can still capture fun stuff on your phone. And like I'm not as like concerned as much with, you know, there used to be that notion of like if you recorded it on your phone that it would be like something that felt more throwaway, you know, that you wanted to save it for something with a quote unquote legitimacy as a video part. But I'm much more loose about that now, and I feel a lot of other people are too. But I will also say this is I approach sort of anything where I really put my time and energy into, being an artist, I want to have something to say with like something that I put my time and energy into. feeling like maybe there's something I could contribute from it. Like I felt like, for instance, with Skate Hard 3000, that there was um, it was about really about documenting things that I had been like exploring and playing with, maybe a year or so leading up to that, that I hadn't got out and recorded it, mostly also because it was the pandemic and we weren't even able to do that. Um, and so I
Yeah,
really
that's
wanted that
really innovative. Some new ideas for sure
oh,
in that
thank you.
edit.
Yeah, I really wanted to try to be immediate and to put it out. So within that, that's what I felt like um was part of the purpose, was it I had the overall vision for what I needed to do. I knew I wanted it to be sort of in contrast to Full Spiral, which I felt was um it felt like more of this like rollerblading saga, because it's like stretches like I think all up within the credits and the intro like about 9 minutes. So it's sort of more this longer kind of journey that you're taking, and I really wanted to create something in contrast to that that was far more immediate, that like was just like almost abrasive and a heightened emotive state. I wanted it all to be at night. I wanted it all to be fisheye. There were just these different modes of expression that I wanted to put out through that. And I think kind of
Yeah.
since also I will say this too, it also was like the first time, doing something a video part that like um I wasn't a part I wasn't filming it, like, on a pair of them skates or Valos. It was, like, kind of I at that point, was sort of on my own, and I wasn't really associated with any company other than Wish Frames, that it felt like to be honest, because there was a whole period where I felt really disconnected with skating um, because of that industry side got sort of like I got lost in the sauce, like, you get too in depth with that side, and I forgot, like, the initial kind of, feelings and passion that you're connected to the act. So that was actually a really liberating video to do, because it felt like I really wanted to do it kind of like for myself, to come out of the pandemic to something that I feel really proud of, that like was very much me, but also taking me to somewhere I hadn't gone before. I mean, well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's still kind of part of the world, like it's still of the world of Full Spiral, like, but yeah, so it was a liberating kind of experience doing that, and I feel like since then, I haven't fully necessarily had the opportunity, or also I just also think I haven't really had as much to say, and I think that that's kind of okay. And I'm not like
Definitely.
necessarily, yeah, I'm not really in a position to like force myself to just skate for skating's sake. So I'm kind of glad that it's like I at this point I do consider like something, to be on the horizon, that I would like to like embark on something at some point, because
Mhm.
times are sort of feeling right, which I think it's a wonderful thing, like to get like that.
That sounds really healthy. That you're not forcing anything, and you don't feel um, like you're required to put something out. I do think a lot of people kind of they feel like they need to periodically put something out, or they don't feel complete, or they feel like something's missing. But it sounds really healthy that you don't really care, and I'm confident that at some point naturally that urge will come to you, and you'll really want to create something. And that's probably where the best things come from, is when the desire to do it is natural, and you don't feel like you need to do it, because we definitely don't need to do it. um, Mind you, I'm very excited for whatever you're going to create next. And I do think
Thank you.
I like the way you speak about wanting to, what did you say, wanting to add something, or wanting to communicate something.
Yeah, like
uh,
like
Contribute was the
contributing
word
to rollerblading.
you
Yeah,
used. Yeah, I like that. And yeah, your contributions are like definitely very innovative, and you like very, I mean, yeah, Skate Hard 3000, and I mean all your edits. A lot of the movements that you do are new, and things that a, a lot of people aren't doing. So it's always exciting when you come out with stuff.
Thank you.
So I'm excited. I'm happy that you have a healthy approach, but I'm also excited for the next thing that you create.
It's sort of interesting, like thinking about like other disciplines, like for instance, it could be music. There's kind of there's an interesting way, like, I mean, there are obviously, like, if you get a record deal, there's expectations of how much you need to produce, like, within that period of time and whatnot. But also, like, some people can get fortunate that they can allow themselves enough time to sort of like gestate and have something to say. But also maybe at the same time they're able to tour, or play shows of like their back catalog or their current material or something.
Right.
Skating sometimes always has this thing where it's like you have to do something all the time or like something new, and it's a bit of a sometimes a burden, I think, to like being
Right.
a participant in like wanting to contribute to the culture in that way, because sometimes it ends up being a big disservice to skaters. If you like oversaturate yourself, it can really work against you even if you are extremely talented. um I also think, like, if we're like drawing that music comparison, like a music comparison could be like if there were more demos, because it's not like when you go out, not that I've had the experience of doing demos that much, but like you're showcasing a part of your skating, to the world. I remember, like, I think it's an Ego. Mike Johnson says something about like how, when you're at a demo, you're like doing like a quarter or something of like about power, about full power or something. But like that's the stuff like I'm really interested in more now. Like whenever I go to a skating
Sorry, I
event.
thought you were gonna say the like. I think he says, "You come to watch us skate. We don't
Yeah,
come to watch you skate." I always
yes,
like
that's true. I mean, and it's very
that would
fitting
be
for the
something that you deal with.
title.
The T-Dogs like coming out to show the pros up. Like, no, kid, you come to watch us skate.
Well, I don't think I certainly could not have that like that attitude, because I also am like bewildered and startled and amazed if just anyone sees me as a position of like I don't know, maybe this is probably too strong of a word, of greatness, or something. Like I've it's hard sometimes when you've done something for so long to be like, oh yeah, I guess I'm sort of in somewhere maybe in a world where those things you're like those people. But I often just feel like so much like any other rollerblader. uh I will say I'm just grateful that anyone appreciates and likes what I do, which is the wonderful exchange of like giving yourself to the world, not only as a rollerblader but as an artist and as an individual. But what I was going to say is that, like, whenever I go to skating events, the thing that these days, okay, so here's a great example. Like skating and film and working on films and videos, whether like you're working on a video part, whether it's for me and I'm editing it, or whether I was working with other people, or whether even if I was making a video for something, it's all sometimes a bit of like the drive is it really comes from yourself, and you're just trying to actualize this thing really for yourself first and foremost. And one of the things I love about going to events is that, like, it feels very much less about me, and that I often skate because, like, obviously I'm not like Julian Cadeau, for instance. Like, I don't ever skate in those contests, thinking that there is any chance of like any benefit of winning or anything. But I just skate in it for participation, so that the event has like one extra person skating in it. Um, that there's also one extra like option of like, that there's more visibility, that you're representing like another stream of skating that kind of exists. Like you're just like giving a showcase. I treat it more like a demo. And I actually like that's a part of skating that I really have been loving and thriving on, is that just like being at like a skating comp or an event and just skating with people, as opposed to it
Yeah.
being you're skating in it and trying to do your best because you're going to win, for instance, and just being
Right.
like just trying to embody and be an ambassador of skating.
Right.
is in the community. Yeah.
And that sounds like such a healthy approach, trying to contribute and take part as opposed to beating everybody and winning, um, just
Yeah,
like a
or like,
demo.
and there's nothing against that, like I
Right.
respect and admire like that kind of pursuit in skating too, and some people are immensely talented at it, but it just takes a different focus, right? And also a lot of
Definitely.
people go to those events for that spectacle at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think like with anything, you always have to find a at least I find there's a I think this sort of speaks to me as a person is that most of my life I always felt like I probably gave more than took. Um, and there's certainly reasons as of why my personality evolved to being that way. Being more being more giving as opposed to taking. But I think just in general, in the skating world, it's really important to balance yourself of how much you take versus how much you give. You know what I mean? I think that's like a good thing to if if you're at a point also particularly where you're in a position where of maybe influence or people looking at you. Um, I think that becomes like something that's really healthy just to remember of like, to give to other people because also you're probably not where you are without people appreciating what you do.
Right. When you say you should give more than you take, like what exactly are you referring to?
Or as in how like I used to be someone who like gave more than I took.
Like what exactly are you talking about giving and taking?
In the context of skating or
Yeah.
well, it could be like contributing. I mean, you could like literally turn up to an event and not have any amount of involvement in it at all. Um other than maybe just skating in it, which I think is also that's a giving too. Like going to an event and you consciously choose to maybe not skate it because who knows, you could feel above it or something. Um,
Right.
or just or the like I do sometimes feel like there's attitudes in the community that end up going that way, unfortunately. But it's like those events are a result of like people's hard work. Um, I mean, I can't go to every event, unfortunately. It's just not like timing wise, financially, it's just not possible. As much as I would love to be out interacting and skating with everyone, it's just not possible. So
Of
I'm always
course. Yeah.
grateful. I'm always grateful whenever I get to go to one. And in some ways, like I don't know, it could be um, it's I think there's a multitude of examples of what it could be. It could be something in the present. It could be taking the opportunity to talk to other people, to talk to other
Right.
skaters, engage in conversation, maybe engaging in a session with each other. Um, it also could be, on a grander scale, it could be giving back to the community as a part of like you could start a company if that's like something that you're invested in that you feel like you could contribute something of yourself that goes beyond the skating. Maybe you're a great graphic designer, maybe you are a filmmaker, so you make videos, or like you really want to you really want to push the technology of urethane, so you get into like the wheel manufacturing, or you're someone like Justin Thursday, or obviously like Cletus Kuhn of Wish Frames, who like really saw the need to create this hybrid frame of a high-low frame and actualize it into the world, particularly at a point when there was like none of that, right? Um, but it doesn't even have to be about also product, which is obviously a
Right.
financial thing. It could just be about like hosting a group skate meet, which is I'm amazed at the amount of options people have, like particularly in a big city like Los Angeles now. There are so many just like rollouts and like nightly skates that are like not obviously not even aggressive focused. Um, and there's lots of like weekend events that are happening. And again, there's almost so much that like at this point, like living in a big city like LA, that like I can't attend them all, unfortunately. Like Rashad Johnson puts on a great effort to put on like the first Sundays, and there's just always lots of things like happening, and I think that's like a really awesome thing, like seeing people giving, but I also will say this is because I feel like I learnt from people of an older generation of me back in Melbourne, of watching them put on events and giving to the community. Like Tim Ward put on the Melbourne skate meets, like from the around 2002 onwards. And then he sort of stopped being able to be as active. So like I took upon that role and just started doing it because none of us wanted to see it go. And I think like being a good example for particularly now that there's like a newer generation and a younger generation, of just showing that like getting them involved in the community, and knowing that there's a local community, there's like a national community, there's an international community, and just like slowly, if you love skating, remember to like give back a little bit, like go to one of those events, or um maybe could be you could buy a shirt, I don't know, but like I think that is like a, kind of an important thing as you get older. You don't have to be in a position of influence, because also at the same time I could say everyone has the possibility of like having influence positively in a community. You don't have to be a superstar by any means.
Right.
Not saying that I am, but you get my kind of vibe. Like you and Joey are a wonderful example of that, of like two people who are so remotely removed from a global community, who have had an immense and significantly important cultural influence on rollerblading. And I know that the two of you would know that. It's very obvious if you look around 2023. But you're also probably very modest about it too, and that probably just speaks both to like your character. But and you didn't go about it to like wanting to necessarily like have an egotistical view of like changing rollerblading. You just wanted to do the things that you did with your friends in your group, and you just were your active way of exchange of giving to the community was the output of a video. Now,
Right.
obviously, like you make products too, because I mean, you two have like some of the people who like have long been obsessed with trying and exploring products, and really like giving your own feedback, and I think that has benefited from skating, like that K2 frame that you and Joey like had involvement in, and then how that is obviously like even planted seeds for other frames that like have probably gestated from those initial ideas.
Right. Yeah,
It's all giving.
there's so many ways that you can give. Um, even just thinking about your presence at a session as giving, in terms of like, how can I make this whole experience more enjoyable for everyone else, as opposed to just being hyper focused on yourself and the tricks that you do. Like, how can I encourage other people, and how can I be, you know, a force of like positive energy that enhances everybody's experience, as opposed to just like worrying about your own enjoyment. And you can do that at a contest or at a session, taking more time to like help
Yeah.
a friend, get a clip maybe that they're working on, or encourage them to push their skating in a certain way. If you see someone doing something that you think is interesting and unique, like encouraging them to like go further in that direction. Sometimes people need to hear that, and people can benefit from having a coach that can spot certain things that they're doing. And it can be difficult to really appreciate the unique skills that you have, because in your head it's just, oh, it's easy, whatever. But someone else might
Yeah.
see that and be like, no, like you need to take that further. Like that, I think about that like porn star slide that you do, that
Mm-hmm.
you've taken like so far. You do thread the needles into it, and you stare bash down like big sets, just with that. You've done so much with that one little unique skill.
Right.
um did you have someone help you foster that, or is that just something that you realized, like, this is really natural for me, I want to do this on like a huge set of stairs, I want to thread the needle into this? And I mean, you've done so many cool things with just that one little
That move.
movement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just like to the point where just discovered something in it, and it felt like enjoyable to explore the opportunity of it. I think one of the things, particularly if we're talking about that move, which it's sort of in between, like, is it a cess slide? Is it just a slide? I actually
Yeah.
call that a star slide.
Nice.
Um, and one of the things that's always like gravitated me towards that was like I always loved doing cess slides, and once I really got into being fairly good at doing Royale cess slides, I loved how that like a cess slide didn't require an obstacle. It's like, it's a flat surface,
Yeah.
of any kind. Well, obviously you can do things on all sorts of stuff. You can do them downstairs, which are not flat. But essentially, like you could do that anywhere. Like you don't have to find like a perfect like ledge or rail to like put that trick on. And I loved that like skating, you could do these movements or tricks or be expressive in your um in your form and your physique without having anything. And that was kind of
So
one of the ones that
accessible.
yeah, that was one of the ones I really liked. And I also, um, I think, trying to remember, like, I think the first one I kind of really played with was like quite a while ago. And it was in, mm, what was it in? I think I think it came out something later. Like it might have been in this video that my friend Jared Thackeray put out for Parallel called Wander, but I did it before, like it was like within the sort of filming time of chapter 2. I did it down the stair set.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I just kind of enjoyed that sort of position and being playful with it because there's something about also being like a very tall rollerblader and being able to like suck into a ball um, and like you can do it kind of standing up high. You can suck into a ball. Like, sometimes like I'll grab it like stale, or
Yeah.
I just love the kind of freedom of making a body movement that's like removed of an obstacle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but I think it all sort of like stems again from like cess slides. I think I remember the first time when I saw um God, this was such I feel like a revolutionary trick when I saw it. It was like I think it was 2015. Could have even been 2014 actually. Might have been 2014. Was Danny Beer in his like it was a Seber edit for him and Brian Long, and he
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
like fakey 180 Mistral cess like down a set of stairs in
Oh
Vancouver.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't think I'd ever seen that before and been like, dude, that is amazing. And yeah, I don't. So like, I think even back then, like, maybe that was like, it could have actually been part of the origin of like exploring the idea of doing the star slide downstairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like, you'd always see stuff of like Nickel Bars doing sort of like soul slides and the acid slides, which I think they called them a flat iron. Malcolm used to do all sorts of like, unusual sort of Mizzou slides, which I think he called like can't remember the names. It was like the turnbacker or something like that. But like even before that, like there's just lots of people who have sort of like played with different things of that nature. Um, but yeah, I think it's always like comes back to that thing of like, and that's actually one of the themes or the concepts that I really tried to explore within Skate Hard 3000 of like um really removing the obstacles and bringing it down to the ground level. I wanted it to really be like, even if I grinded something, it was like close to the ground, like it was a curb, being really like feeling um, that kind of connection to the surface. Because I feel sometimes we do get pretty disconnected from it, like particularly if you're just like skating a handrail, the ground doesn't seems like such like a kind of a byproduct of just the environment. It's allowing you to like get
Right.
onto the rail and down. Um, and yeah, like that's kind of like
I definitely think.
the feeling of it.
Yeah. I think that's something that skating today is a lot better at using the ground than we
Mm,
used to be. It used to be just a
yeah,
byproduct of you jump from the ground onto the rail or
Yes.
into the air to gap, but the
Well,
ground was just like an approach and a landing, and that's it.
I think like a lot of things, like particularly when I look at skating and like contributing ideas and tricks, like also have come from um maybe initially being inspired by things of like in the past, that I loved when I was younger, and maybe just like recontextualizing them. Like I remember like John Elliott is like one of the first rollerbladers that had a huge significant impact on me. And I remember like being 14 and doing power slides to grinds, like on down ledges, just exactly like he did, like in
Yeah.
Uncloned.
Yeah.
And I also remember like, yeah, when I was like really starting to skate a lot more, and like when I just moved to LA, and I'd done chapter 2, but I was filming for Paycheck. Like, there were things like, there's a trick that I remember that Charles Dunkel did that I always loved, was like, I think he does it in Still This Video. He did like top acid on a handrail and then landed in power slide, and then he pops up to alley toe roll, like 180 out, like sort of things
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Like I loved how you could push the trick beyond the parameters of just like the obstacle itself. And it seems amazing
Right.
to watch skating now, where that's almost becoming like commonplace. It's really quite beautiful, that the ending of the trick doesn't have to be as soon as you land. Also, it's like
Right.
there's that thing where we were just talking about, like, even if it's a flat ledge, the skating up to it and away from it, like, sometimes seems so disregarded. And it's like, well, it didn't really matter, you were on rollerblades,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's like that connection of like the rolling and your actual style that you can express through that is, to me, it's so important. And I even think about how I move now, as to whether you looked at chapter 2, my body movements are like way more they're more expressive, and I feel like I'm engaging in a different I'm getting in a different feeling from skating, because I'm trying to use more of my body in a sort of gestural kind of way. um
Love that.
it's almost a bit more like dancing, because I was always probably a bit more like afraid to dance when I was younger, whereas I partake in it a lot now. I love dancing, and I think
Yeah.
that has helped that freedom of movement. It's helped a confidence within me, um and there's something within that that I can also think like can speak to your expression in skating, rather than like what trick you're doing. Because
Yeah.
also, the some of the things that we love so much about skating is the things that we can't replicate ourselves. And it's like that sometimes can be a certain style of a topsoil, for instance, like a John Julio topsoil is a John Julio topsoil,
Yeah.
but like the way someone moves on skates, like how Dominic Sagona like moves on skates, is so uniquely him. The way Brandon Smith
Right.
skates around is so uniquely him. And I almost think those are the things that you want to hope you can attain. That you feel like that there is something that like becomes uniquely you in the movement, as opposed to like you like you being just something that expresses like a skill set of tricks, because that kind of feels
Right.
more a little bit, maybe that's more partially sometimes a little bit more aligned with like the competitive spirit of skating, of contest.
Right. And it's more defined. It's a defined body position, a top
Yeah.
acid or a kind grind, or the most expressive artistic things are, like you said, when it's more just dancing. I mean, dancing is extremely general. There's so many different ways you could dance and move your body. When you're doing things that are not preordained, or there isn't like a history and a proper way of doing it, when it's just like that's the most expressive that
Mm.
rollerblading can be. Something that me and Joey
Yeah.
have talked about a lot lately is how grinding is really a big, it can be a big, what's the right word, distraction or blinder to
Yep.
other possibilities.
Sure.
So it's like you'll have like an amazing environment, and there's like a really nice ledge. So you have all this interesting architecture, all these
Yeah.
possibilities, but we become so hyper focused on this ledge, I mean, and I'm guilty of it because like it's so much fun, right?
Sure.
And it's like this gold nugget that you see, and it's like, oh yeah, this ledge, I'm so into this, and
Yep.
then you become blinded to all these other possibilities around you.
I love when
And
obstacles become just a part of the your transit like through a space. You know, like
right,
I love like the last couple of sessions I've had, I've just gone to this parking lot in LA, and I love just like it's really open. Curbs there are like really wax. It's like really so fun. But like what I do for a lot of the time is like I'll just carve around and like move and just like I do crossovers and I'll skate fakie and I'll do all that. But then like every so often I'll end up close to the curb and I just like jump up saw grind or like I just jump up like a
right.
Markio, and it's just part of the movement of continuing the overall like transit around this space rather than going there and just like. But it's also like I also am like maybe in a position of like I have the ability because I've also been rollerblading so long. So like I've gone to these ledges and I've learned how to sweat stance. I've learned how to royale. Like I've done those so much. So, if
You've
someone
had those
starts,
obsessive
yeah, yes.
practicing
So
sessions.
people in
Yeah.
skating who start, I totally understand how they get obsessed with learning grinds and wanting to do the next variation of it or whatever. But
Oh,
like
it's
it's
so
funny.
fun.
Yeah, it's just funny how like for me now, like that's not really the concern at all. Like I can almost just give them up. Like, and I'm fine if I just buzz around and it's almost like a connection to like the original sort of movement of skating that like was happening in the birth of skating in the late 80s, of just like it was more about you moving of stuff, or like even when they first did the grinds, it was just like about sliding on something. It was a front side, and that like that feeling, it didn't matter about the technical. Well, obviously it wasn't accessible at the time, but now for me it's like it doesn't really matter about the technical aspects sometimes of the grind. It's really just about personally feeling the movement of like grinding across a ledge and then keep going. So I kind of embrace that at this point. That's sort of like how I kind of like find myself.
That's a healthier. I mean, yeah. I mean, either way, it can be really fun to hyper focus on the ledge, but you really are just blinding yourself to all these other possibilities. I think at like what you described in your younger days of going through those hyper focused periods of time, it's kind of like
Yeah.
rollerblading as a whole has
Yeah.
gone through those hyper focused times, and
Hmm.
now it's starting to like look around and seeing all these other possibilities.
Another thing I've
But
found
it
of. Sorry, go ahead.
just, I mean, it is a necessary part of somebody's process. If they do want to gain all these technical skills, you do need
Yeah.
to like hyper focus on all these things. But it's important not to, it's important to, I think, variation is very important
No,
in
that's
skating.
absolutely. Yes,
maybe
absolutely. Because
maybe you do have those sessions where you're hyper focused, but then you do have those sessions where you're just like rolling around and connecting to that very simple act of just cruising through a environment.
yeah, I had a session. It was for it was for a memorial session for Joey who had passed away earlier, and we had like a big session at the Paramount skate park here. And I remember during that session, I just got into like really wanting. I started playing with true spin negative Mizus, and I'm not sure if I had done it before, but it was like again, I just felt I entertained what felt right at the moment, and I just wanted to explore that movement, and I just hyper focused on doing it on a ledge. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
sometimes, you said like variation, I go back into like wanting to do something like that too, because it's still like a challenge and it's fun.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
The
there's nothing wrong with it. I think the only problem is when it becomes too much of the focus, and yeah, you don't see those other things. But it's fun to go into the rabbit hole sometimes and just become hyper focused on like a very micro
Yes.
movement. you know?
Yeah, I sometimes like think about how like particularly if you're doing those things and it becomes about like there's a potential that it contributes to skating greater. I think about in the relation of like more so now I think about how people who don't skate interact with the skating in which I can possibly do. In that like most people who don't have an exposure to skating like don't know those technicalities, you know, and if you're like exploring, you know, hyper specific movements or body positions, they're gonna go over the head of like an average person or someone who
Oh
has
yeah.
like a very, very entry level, like maybe to rollerblading. Maybe they're just like a rec skater. Um, and you know, they might see a front side the same as whether you did like something else, you know.
Oh
Maybe the
yeah.
feeling of just sliding down something is like what's the most captivating. So sometimes I try to like think about, well, how can you reduce that technicality down to just something that is expressive in the same way of when I originally found skating that, you know, was really just like jumping over the stairs and it didn't matter about like how many spins you did. It was more about whether you did it with, you know, a safety grab or whether you Luke hanged or whether you stale grabbed. You
Right.
know, it was more about like the fact that you just jumped over it and it was uh, an expressive moment. So I try to I try to sort of embody that or keep reminding myself of that these days too. I think it's kind of important. But the other thing I wanted to ask about you, because in terms of like you and Joey both like love skating street, you have such a rich history of loving street skating in terms of like culturally, but also like how of what you've participated in of giving to the culture is like, you know, a lot of it's been through street skating. And with it, living in LA, like with the amount of like skate parks that have popped up like over the course of, you know, the past 5 years, there's you're it's skate parks are so accessible now, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we both, you know, when I started skating in this small town, like there wasn't even a skate park. So even though I
Yeah.
watched skating contests and I watched vert, none of that was accessible. The only thing was going to the local school and sliding on wooden benches. Um, but what I was going to ask is that, like, even though it's so accessible to skate these skate parks, which are often so perfect now, at least in LA, that sometimes I find that experience extremely stale.
Right.
Of skating those obstacles. There's something about like street skating that I still love so much, even if it is just skating in that parking lot. That there is an inconsistency to the space. There's a coarseness to like not only the ground that you're rolling on, but it also might be like the ledge that you're sliding on or whatever you're interacting with. It's not obviously intended for it.
Right.
And I also say like being an adult, being 36, like I also approach street skating differently than I was maybe with like I wouldn't say I was a reckless, you know, kid or teenager, but like you definitely disregard like destruction of property in different ways. Like I
Yeah.
won't just skate anything. Um,
I
but
have to say, I love throughout your edits. There's a theme of being really respectful for like the environment. Like there's the scene of you in reactivated, like picking up the scooters, and
oh
in
yeah,
Danny's edit, like cleaning the grass that you kind of messed up. I really appreciate that. That's
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I've always sort of felt that there's this thing, and I feel like it's just learning from like maybe my upbringing of like putting things back the way you found them, or like, you know, if you there was always that thing when people like would skate a handrail and they would just like land on the other side and just mess up like a beautiful garden that like
Yeah.
a school maybe spent lots of money on like you know, like creating and
Right. And a
so and
worker
I
spent hours like
yeah.
meticulously
And I
doing
think even as a
this.
teenager, I knew that it was like kind of wrong. But even if I did land on a grass or something, I try to be a little gentle with it. But like,
Yeah.
or whatever point, like try. It's also that thing of like, even at, like at the Metrocard Classic at the very end, like contest, people do that. They'll say, "Can everyone like be so you just take a moment to like throw out the trash that you see around you. We really need to, you know, put the space back to the way we found it, you know, so that we can continue to put on these events." And I think that
Right.
translates with street skating too. That if you're not overly disruptive, um, you know, to like the area around it, that you're not like leaving trash, or you're not like, ripping up the garden or whatever, like that they're not going to be that probably upset with you skating it.
Right.
Unless it becomes a whole other things of obviously like liability and blah blah blah, all that stuff. But realistically, I think if you are respectful with the spaces that you skate, it often can be okay. I
Yeah.
really nowadays, like, I don't like, if a new building is popped up, I almost feel it's predatory. Like, there's this thing of like people loving to like hit this brand new ledge that's like perfectly, it's a new concrete ledge that's popped up in something, an apartment building or something, which is funny because like, skating is so far removed nowadays of like a political act, of like, this sort of like you know a cultural, like an aggression, like angry youth or something that's so reactionary that even like street skating could be say that was like, in the history of street skating, like, back to skateboarding, could be reactionary to stuff like that. But you could think of like maybe grinding a brand new ledge outside the front of like this beautiful built like apartment building is like a political statement to gentrification or something. But no one is making these artistic statements in skating. but but so like I won't skate stuff like that, like I really don't like skating people's houses,
Yeah.
for the most part, obviously, right? Like, unless someone's cool with it. But
Right.
it's just like kind of like it's a respect, it's like growing as a person. um I think I remember like watching Jan Welch's a recent thing of, it was maybe it was one of his vault sessions with Omar Wysong and Ken Lee, but he maybe made the the statement, which I've felt before, of being, an older member of society. Like, obviously, we're not talking about being like the elderly, but like just being older in general, and thinking of whether or not you can still like hop the fence to a school in the same way you did when you're a teenager, and you could care, you wouldn't think anything about it. I also sometimes think in regards to things like that, like it's funny how the act of skating still takes you back to those youthful days if you've been doing it for so long. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, just always, just in general, just conscious of like your impact of street skating. But the ultimate thing of me saying this is that like I don't think anything will change for me for street skating, because I think I love the kind of inconsistency of it. It doesn't feel sterile. It feels like you're creating something like fresh, and it's reactionary, and it's never quite the same. Spots come and go. Like, how do you all feel about that? Because you do have like, quote unquote, one of the best skate parks in the world, but you still love
Right.
street skating, and you still actively
Right.
do that in your town. But you're like, I mean, I'm guessing Joey must be 40 as well. Your
Yeah.
parents, you're members of the society, but like you're also doing this act that at times could be a little bit destructive. So how do you both navigate
For
that?
sure. Yeah. Well, I think when you say the skate park is sterile, I think it's because, it's a facility that's designed for these tricks, so it can feel a little bit dictated to you how you're supposed to use all these objects. Like, you have an idea in your head. This is a quarter pipe. I roll up it. I slide on the coping. I go back down. This is a ledge. I slide across it. And this is a launch box. I gap from one side to the other. And I'm very grateful to have a really nice skate park in my town. It's helped me become a lot better technically at skating, and Joey too. It's a great place to go and exercise all of your different skills.
I think
But
of it like a
there's
playground.
something about, yeah, for sure. There's something about street skating where it's more open ended. It's less dictated to you, like what you're supposed to do in that location or on that space. So it's like easier to get into a mindset of creativity. But a good mental trick, and something we try to do, not that we are always successful at it, but it's good to go to, if you're going to skate a park, to pretend like it's a street spot. So like, how would you look at that space or whatever if it was if it was a street spot?
Yeah.
And it can change your experience of it, but it's funny how you have to try to trick yourself
Yeah.
out of it being a sterile place. So I love both. I love going to the skate park and skating, but it's important to street skate if you're concerned with like innovation and creativity, a lot of that happens on the street, even though it can be like a mental trick. Like there are things you could have done it in the skate park, but the odds of you doing it probably aren't as high because you'll be distracted. You'll have your blinders on because of this beautiful quarter pipe that you see that you just want to like session the quarter pipe. You know,
I've never really had the hold the opinion of like skate park tricks are less than street tricks. I know that was held by people in a particular period of time, and I also remember,
I always hated the like the rule that you shouldn't put skate park in an edit.
Yeah,
that always bugged me. I think if it's good, it's good, and
I also will say I love skating skate parks too. Like I just sometimes find the really newer ones to be a bit less sterile because they're kind of too clean at times. Like I really do love skating certain skate parks that like are an older generation. That just have a little bit more. Like you wouldn't have thought of it at the time because you really would have seen it like, oh, it's Park and Street, they're different. But even now, just because there's like really, really like elaborate skate parks that are so well designed, the polishing of the concrete, it's just they've got to a level of the way they do it now, so they didn't have it before. But so like
and there's almost been a standardization about like the grade of the bank, and like it's like it almost feels like a regulation bank and a regulation quarter pipe, whereas like some of the older skate parks, they didn't have those defined concepts. So you'll find really weird quarter pipes that maybe don't go to like a vert, or they're extremely dramatic, or you'll find like really steep banks. And I love old skate parks for that. The more uniqueness in the objects.
They're more homogenous now, particularly as certain companies are good at it. So like people investing money probably want the best outcomes. So it's like, oh, these people are professional at it. They've like executed this. This is a portfolio. Let's get them to do it. But it almost seemed like, back in the day, like who are these different construction companies that were kind of doing it, and who are the people involved with the design process? It also made me think like
it was like someone's dad, like
that's
interpreting
like
these
how
objects
varied they were.
Yeah.
It's like you've definitely seen those galleries of like the bizarre skate parks in the world that are just like so oddly shaped. But I think even within those limitations, like if you're creative enough, you can actually find something usually in them.
Definitely.
But,
definitely.
Yeah.
And we still there's in Kamloops, there's the greatest skate park in the world, and there's also the worst skate park in the world. The worst skate park in the world, it must be maybe 30, 40 years old. There's a famous story about Tony Hawk and his tour going to the old skate park. And Tony Hawk was like, this is the worst skate park that I have ever been to. It is so bad.
Wow.
And
is
it's
that the
so
one that
weathered,
you and Joey skate a lot? That's like got the banks, and there's that section where like the bank sort of turns into like a flat ledge, and there's fences all around it.
Yeah.
That I mean, to me, that presents itself as something really kind of fun. I actually would love to skate there.
The design of it is actually really interesting. I really like it, but the ground is so extremely weathered. It's probably worse than a lot of the street spots that we hit in terms of the smoothness of the concrete. Like it's so freaking rough. And a lot of the parts like where the bank meets the ground, there's just like a huge crack on it. Like it's very dangerous. Like kids go there, they just get messed up.
Skating street.
we're really hoping that the city eventually rejuvenates it a little bit, even just with like a new layer of concrete on the ground. It would be like super fun because, like you said, like the design of it, I don't think is terrible. It really aids to like creativity, and it's easy to think of it as a street spot because it feels like a street spot. It doesn't really feel like a skate park. It's so rough.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we'll tell skateboarders that we still go to that park, and they're like, "What? You go there?" Like,
that's fascinating.
But it's a good spot, even though it's rough.
One of my favorite
It's,
skate parks, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but is the LES skate park in New York City, the one that's like under that big bridge. They had the Bushy Pope skate off last year.
yeah, yeah,
I love how like it almost just encapsulates everything of what like this idea of skating used to be to me, like mixed in with like street culture and so like you know an urban activity, a very city street graffiti, concrete, chain link fences, like that skate park's like it's smooth, but there's a little grit to it, all around it, and like
yeah.
there's something like it has personality. I
Right.
really love that, and that's where it's like, yeah, I'm not just a street skater. Like I would give anything to always skate that skate park. Fortunately, I don't
Totally.
live there, but like there's something about those environments that like I really love. That it's almost like a yeah, skate parks are like a community hub too. Obviously, like
Yeah. We have a couple parks in the area, like a couple hours out of town. They're
yeah,
like sacred facilities to me, like
mm,
old weathered skate parks. Like there's this one in Sycamoose.
right,
Some of the objects are pretty standard, but some of it is like really different and really steep banks.
sure.
And those facilities like are just, yeah, they're sacred to me. Like if they
Mm,
got torn down, I would just be absolutely devastated that I couldn't go
right.
visit and skate. And like people don't probably, people that live in those little towns, they definitely don't realize how special those places are to other people. They might
Oh,
think, oh,
sure.
this old park, no one ever uses this thing. you
Right.
know it would be
Yeah.
strange for them to imagine someone that lives a few hours away that it's like a very important location to them just to visit like a couple times a year.
Mm. No, that's very very true. Yeah, it's fun. It's funny how skating often can be like that. That it was, even street locations have become so important to,
Yeah,
a culture that like other people like might have just had seen them as such as an eyesore.
yeah,
um I think the greatest example of that, which seems to be like it was like a space that the city didn't really ever use for anything quote unquote practical, is like the Brooklyn Banks, right? Like think about how
yeah.
culturally significant that is to not, obviously to rollerblading, but even more so to skateboarding and to other of the, activities within the action sports world. That
And it's crazy how a spot like that is even, it's world famous. Like I've
yeah,
never been there. I live in a different country,
yeah,
but I know the Brooklyn Banks. Like it's this
yep,
iconic street spot.
yeah, and it's
And
like
cities
people,
might not even be cognizant that it has had this cultural impact.
yep, yeah, and people do who are within like skating communities definitely like travel to see that spot, like have done so in the
Yeah,
past.
skate
I am.
tourism.
It's the one thing have never skated. I always wish I'd got the opportunity to. Um, I like they had the nine stair like session just around the Metrica Classic weekend, which was really fun to
Yeah,
skate.
I
It was
watched
it
some of
was
that.
it,
Yeah,
it was cool, to be a part of that, for its like historical significance. But I got to actually go over and like kind of just peek through the fences of the other main areas of what's considered the Brooklyn banks, and it was actually cool to see that like the banks itself aren't torn up. Like all the bricks are still there like this. It just doesn't
yeah,
have a
yeah,
flat bottom. It doesn't have a flat bottom anymore. Like the flat bottom, where all the bricks were, like on the ground, they're all taken up. But the actual like bank itself, like it goes from the flat
yeah,
bottom like
yeah.
up to those walls. They're all still there. I thought they'd taken all of the bricks off
Mm.
and there was no banks anymore. So it kind of made me there was an element of hope of thinking, oh, maybe they'll just like surface out the ground. They probably won't put the bricks back, but maybe it'll just surface, they'll concrete it or something. And maybe, I mean, you only want to hope that they'll like make it so the banks are still accessible via skating. You never know what they could do. They
Yeah,
could do all sorts of things. But I still think like there's that thing of street skating that even if an iconic spot does change, if and when it does open back up and it's a little different, maybe that just will offer new interpretations of like how to go about it. or it could be completely
Definitely.
inaccessible, but who knows?
Yeah.
Skate stoppers are a great example of that, and I think like I've personally tried to like utilize them in unique ways of like um using them to my advantage of like turning them into something that can create a possible trick, a possible movement, rather than like, yes, they're hindering one type of movement, which is sliding across the entire thing, but like maybe you can, I've done tricks where you hop between each one, like, so
Right.
there's
Right.
always there's sometimes it just takes you to think beyond what's the original intention. Mm,
That might definitely have to do with the creative revolutions in all of the sports, rollerblading, skateboarding, biking, is just the fact that there's not as many perfect rails and perfect ledges. It might actually be a blessing, even though people
yeah,
get frustrated with it. It might have just,
forced creativity.
took away that distraction and opened up a
Yeah,
whole
because
new
that
world.
was kind of a golden age of those obstacles, because it was a sort of
Yeah.
a new-ish activity, like waxing ledges and sliding on them or grinding down handrails. That was so new,
And
so
skate stoppers didn't exist. That's like a
yeah,
new
and
technology, and architects didn't worry about,
yes,
if the location was going to be overrun with kids. They just thought, oh, this looks really pretty, all
yeah,
these nice rails and ledges. They didn't think
and
like,
they might have
oh, we
even
shouldn't
been
build
built.
this.
They might have even built and designed like decades before. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. So it's kind of fascinating in that way how it's changed. Yeah, I like there's something kind of amazing about whenever you do come across those like legacy spots that still exist. They're an old ledge that
Whoa.
has been there forever. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh, yeah.
or a rail that was like still the original material that's been there for decades. Like it's the old hard steel that they
Oh,
used in rails. I know you know
there's
what I'm talking
something
about. I know you
so
appreciate
special.
these.
Yeah. It's something so special about like a street ledge that's existed for a really long time that so many people have hit.
Yeah.
You get those layers of wax,
Mm.
and like it's imperfect, and like just sliding it, there's something really special about that. Like I really appreciate it because real we don't really have any ledges like that in Kamloops.
Really?
I
Okay.
mean, we have like maybe a 3-inch high curb that Joey and I skate quite a bit, and
Yeah.
that maybe we've been hitting that for maybe 6 or 7 years. But like a really nice like ledge does not exist in
Mm.
Kamloops,
Yeah.
which it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, it would be nice to have, like I'm talking about how awesome it is to have these ledges, but it's also
Yeah.
awesome not to have those distractions because you have
Right.
to make something out of nothing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also parallels life in a way that like nothing is permanent, nothing lasts forever.
No.
Um, these beautiful ledges that like once were a thing in the 90s, like in a public school, schools get funding, they get remodeled. Those things are gone, and they
Yeah.
just exist in a time, and maybe hopefully they were documented, but also sometimes there's something beautiful about something that, and this is speaking to the times that we live in, but there's something also beautiful about the memory of something that was never documented, that was like
Oh yeah.
not
Yeah.
photographed. It's just told by like almost just like there's a, a mysticism to it because it's like it's by word of mouth. Did you have that like
Yeah.
growing up? Because there was like in my small town, I remember there was the best skater of all of like the area was Peter Dunham, and he still rollerblades now. Actually, he's been living in Sydney for years. But there was this big handrail that was like a 19 or 20 stair inside a shopping center. Like it went up to like the cinema, the movie theater. And I remember hearing that he did that rail, and like he kind grinded cinema rail, and it was this legend. But I never saw any footage of it. I mean, I know that he did it hands down, but it was that thing. You're just like, dude, Peter Dunham did that. I'd go to the shopping center with my family, when I was like 12, and I'd look at this rail and I would try to imagine it. And I remember
Yeah.
being 13 and ending up at that place because I ended up becoming somehow, like even as a 13-year-old, in his orbit one time skating, and he and a couple of others did hit that rail, so I got to see them. I don't remember him kind grinding it, but he probably front royaled it or topsoiled or soul or something. But yeah, that sort of like, you know, the mysticism of certain tricks that existed that beyond a kind of like video recording is so strong in an older generation.
It can almost become more legendary because it
Yeah.
lives in your imaginations as
Yeah.
opposed to like
It's like
a
folklore.
digital documentation. And you know, it's up to your imagination to think about like what he did and how he did it. And yeah, there's
What's
definitely something.
what's your comments on that now, given the fact that like there's pros and cons to both of it, but like
Yeah,
sometimes I was thinking like is there like the death to the skate video at this point? Because like I always try to think of like what it would be like starting as a brand new rollerblader now, where seeing like any new video of a rollerblader will come up like probably every second if you refresh Instagram, you know, and you follow enough
yes,
people, you'll
yeah,
see
yeah,
something new of rollerblading every second. Whereas like I didn't see rollerblading in a moving form until like, well, other than like, you know, in a movie of people skating around like the Mighty Ducks, but like in terms of aggressive
yeah,
rollerblading, I don't think I saw it until my dad like took a trip to Melbourne and bought VG7 and brought it back
yeah,
as a gift, you know, from the skate shop. And that was the only video for like maybe until like later that Christmas. I was lucky to get another video from the sports store. But
yeah.
seeing skating now like so much and constant, it's such a different um it's a whole different world, and it's also a whole different way of navigating it because you put stuff out, but how quickly it becomes like, you know, it could still be on your feed, but how often are people scrolling back to a, you know, a 2015 post in 2023 when you've got a
Yeah.
timeline that's like stuff of, at this point those apps want you to post every day, um and certainly stuff must get lost unless you like are really
Oh yeah.
impacted by it and you have a good memory. Whereas in the past, you know, like videos really were like a marking point for certain things because you saw it, you could reference back to it. It became a part of not, you know, as a video library, whether it was your own or your friends or just like the idea of it being in a video library across the world, you know,
Yeah.
as like a concept. It's strange how that's sort of
I think we're very lucky to have lived through that generation. I think the experience that we had watching skate videos, because it was so rare to see new skating, it
yeah,
was so impactful. And it was like when you got a new video on VHS
yeah,
and you experienced it after being starved for months, years at a time,
sure,
seeing no new footage. When you saw that new tape and it was like a window into modern rollerblading, there
yeah,
was always those leaps in like new tricks and new ways of dressing,
yep,
and it would just fucking blow your mind.
yeah,
Like it was so intense, and you would watch that same VHS on repeat like 50 times in a row.
mhm,
That that experience, I think, is extremely rare now because there's just so much content at our fingertips, and we don't
yeah,
appreciate it as much. The experience of seeing new skating, it doesn't have any impact. But to answer your question, I think skate videos are even more important now to create experiences for people that are
right,
more impactful than an Instagram post.
yeah,
That people at least do have to invest some time into watching. I don't think I don't think it'll be experienced the same way it was in the 90s, but I definitely think it's a healthier way to consume content is in like a
yeah,
longer form where it's like it's a world that you're witnessing, maybe that people have worked on over some months or years, and it's like a group of friends that are collaborating
yeah,
and kind of, you know, creating this world for you to witness. There is something important about that as opposed to just putting up some Instagram clips.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I'm as addicted to Instagram as everyone else, but I'll often find myself
Yeah.
like just scrolling through, just seeing skating, and in the back of my head, I know that it's not a healthy way to experience skating. I
Yeah.
know that I would be better off not seeing this, but I'm
Yes.
addicted to it. Like I can't stop, and
Mhm.
that's bad. I think we're all addicted to it,
Yeah.
and it would be healthier if we could all fucking get rid of our Instagram apps and just watch full length videos.
Yeah.
100% that would be healthier.
Sure.
But nobody's going to do that because we're all addicted to the juice, you know, which
Absolutely.
is which is a shame. I got to get going pretty soon.
Okay.
Um,
That's totally fine.
but
I've been thoroughly enjoying this conversation.
yeah, this has been an awesome chat. We should do it again, maybe in
Of
another
course.
year.
Maybe another year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think let's see what 2024 presents itself with, and I'm just a phone call away.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I really look forward to the next project that you decide to put your energies into.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And same with you and Joey. You know,
Thank you.
I don't know if you have been working on something over the course of this, summertime, and it's you're going to work on putting it together, or something just evolves next year. But yeah, always, you're never not doing stuff, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah, we're cooking up something at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just
Cool.
I'm addicted to the process of making stuff. So
And I know I told Danny and Stuart, like I do hope to come up at some point. Like it doesn't seem like it probably won't be this end of this year, but we never know. But
yeah, let me
still would
know.
hope,
Maybe I'll
if I am
come out
there
and
this time, I would love to make that effort to come see the two of you.
yeah, calls from the bank, part two.
All right, we'll be calling.
Yeah, yeah, call me. I'll come.
Speak,
All
man.
right, buddy. Nice chatting.
You too. Speak to you soon. Say hi to your family for me.
I will. Thanks, Robbie.
Go. Bye.